a few practical hints and tips to help you look after your gardens and school grounds over the summer holidays. I just want to start by just thinking about watering itself. I'd imagine most of you who are here understand using rainwater is better than mains water, so hopefully you've got some water butts near your gardens and areas that you've got growing going on. So that's a great idea. When you're actually watering, if you can aim to get the water right at the roots and think about puddling around the plant, it's just a much more efficient way of using the water rather than spreading it around in the soil and the leaves where it will just evaporate off. It's just getting used directly by the plant. If you can water earlier in the day or later in the day, again, it's just slightly lower temperatures, so there's a reduced loss of water just to evaporation when water's getting spread around and it's in the heat of the day. And water droplets can focus the light and scorch the leaves. A useful thing to do is to, after you've watered, or after you think you've watered, just scrape away some of the soil around the area that you've been watering in. And sometimes you might be surprised that how shallowly the water has sunk through the soil. It can often take more water than you think to filter right down through the soil to get to the roots. And when soil and compost has got really dry, it sort of becomes waterproof almost, and it can take a while to get damp again and just soak all the water up. And I mean, I think as a gardener, when we've had hot weather, and then you get some rain, that's actually a good time to do watering because the really dry, almost waterproof soil is getting wet again, and then the water is a bit more easily absorbed, and it can be, you get sort of more a sort of a better result for the effort that you're putting in from watering. And so after you think you've watered, have a little scrape, and even if it's a bit damp and drizzly, maybe just investigate. If you think, oh, it seems a wee bit rainy, I'm not going to worry about watering, but just have a little investigation and see how wet it actually is. Okay, we can pop on to the next slide. This is a great opportunity to connect with the wider school community. Trying to keep a garden going over the summer is difficult because if it's very dry and hot, the plants do need watered. But could you involve some of the wider school community, parents, grandparents, other relations or friends might be keen enough to come and help sustain the watering effort over the holidays? The other idea is you might have a local community space or garden, and then you've got the advantage of maybe getting people involved who are used to working in a garden over the summer and can sort of efficiently help with the watering, and just build up that relationship. As your sort of nature park is growing in your school, it's a nice way to connect with the sort of wider gardening community and sort of nature community roundabout. Perhaps your school run summer clubs, or you have an organisation coming in to run summer clubs over the holidays. Asking them if they might be interested in using the children and young people to help out with the watering might be a welcome suggestion. It's a sort of low risk activity, it's on site, and we all know that children and water, they love sort of messing about with that in the summer, so perhaps it could be a little bit of a joint effort there, making use of a summer club on site. And traditionally, we might take the class hamster home, but why not ask the community, the school sort of community, teachers, learners, other sort of friends and families to look after some of the plants, the indoor plants that you've maybe got, or some greenhouse plants. Just take them home for the summer and have a go at looking after them. And I'm sure a lot of you will know many site staff in a school can be keen gardeners themselves, and perhaps you could persuade them or encourage them to help out if they get a chance to use some of the produce. If you've got a fruit or vegetable garden going, you might just be able to persuade them to help out as you do the watering over the summer. And we can pop on to the next slide. So yeah, a couple of other sort of practical things to think about are if you've got plants in the ground or a large raised bed, you might want to think about putting some mulch down around the roots of the plants. It's a great way of sort of preserving the water in the soil and trapping water there so it doesn't just evaporate out into the atmosphere. You can use things like thick cardboard, old mats and carpets, bark, stones, or used compost, anything to create that sort of thick, kind of semi-permeable layer around the sort of root area of the plants. But one thing to just think about is it's really important that the ground that you're mulching is wet and the water is soaked right down through the ground to the roots. If you put mulch on top of dry soil, you basically stop more water getting in when it rains, or you vastly reduce it. So make sure before you mulch, you've really soaked the area, and do that little digging test to find out how deep the water's gone. Has it really soaked down into the soil? And then for things maybe like in a greenhouse, or if you've got pots, plants in pots, you could try, and you could practice this now before the end of term with your learners, just making a sort of wicking system where you use something like cotton shoelaces or sort of binding tape to be tucked into the compost of a pot, and then the cord or the tape runs into a water container, and that acts like a wick, pulling the water through into the drier soil compost. So you could try that out, and you want them sort of quite close to each other, and a nice sort of thick bit of tape or a few bits of cotton shoelaces. Give that a go, and then the plant can just sort of get the water when it needs it. And we can pop on to the last slide from me. Another sort of short-term-ish solution, potentially up to a couple of weeks, might tide you over, if you've got plants in pots, is to sit them in a shallow tray, just like in that photo there, and give them a good water, and even let some of the water soak through so that they're sitting in a shallow bit of water. You don't want plants to be sitting in deep water. You don't want the roots sitting in water for very long, because the roots need air and oxygen to survive, and if they're sitting in water, that it actually kills the roots. For a short while, a day or so, it shouldn't be too bad. So you could soak those plants and just let them sit in a little shallow bit of water, and make sure they're sitting in a shady place and out of the wind, somewhere sheltered. And you could even use some horticultural fleece, which you can get from a garden centre. It's just a very, very sort of fine material, or something like an old net curtain, even a sheet, a thin light sheet, and just put that over the plants, tuck it in so it doesn't blow away, weight it down with bricks, and that will just improve a little bit of humidity around those plants, give them a bit of shading, and keep them out of the wind so that they're not just evaporating and transpiring all the water out of their leaves.